So folks, good morning everybody. Look, you've heard of all the great upcoming opportunities from the Queensland Government as well as Logan City Council. So I'm here to help you guys connect the dots and hopefully helping each and every one of you win contracts or opportunities. Now show of hands in the room, who would love to win a contract or supply opportunity with the Queensland Government or hopefully Logan City Council? Oh, come on, guys. Hopefully all of us in the room this morning, right? Yeah, fantastic. Key things to note down is that with your opportunities with government or council, they can either be direct. However, with some of us, even if we don't win direct opportunities with either state government or local council, there might be indirect opportunities within the supply chain as well. So always just bear that in mind, that there's always direct opportunities in either working with state government or Logan City Council, or despite that, there may also be indirect opportunities, maybe with working with the winning supplier to hopefully utilize some arrangements underneath. So folks, just to introduce myself, my name is Michael Lee. I have met some of you this morning, but for those of you that don't know me, I work for the Department of State Development, Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning Office, SEQ South. Now, myself and my team, we are based out on the Gold Coast in Southport, and we operate and help businesses within the Gold Coast, Logan, and Redlands region. Now, just a quick introduction. I've got my colleague Shaukat Barua, just at trade stand number 2 as well. So if anything that I'm talking about today resonates with you, or if you'd like to know about some of our upcoming workshops and webinars, please go see Shaukat. He'll be able to give you, I guess, just the fact sheet, just with all the key contacts and some of the upcoming events that we've got as well. Now, just before we begin, I'd like to also pay my respects to the traditional owners in which this event is taking place. And it's really paying my respects to the elders past, present, and also emerging. Now, in regards to state development, show of hands, who's heard of state development or is already currently working with state development? Oh, just a few hands have gone up. What I tend to do when I deliver these presentations, I like to always say that state development were really the Queensland government's best kept secret. So at the core, we've got teams that look after the coordinated projects from our Coordinator General. So it's all the major projects that takes place across the state. Our teams also span across infrastructure and planning. And since the recent election, we've also brought in our colleagues from local government as well. But with what myself and Shaukat do out of the SEQ South office, we work hand in hand with you as a business to help you on that growth journey and to hopefully help you raise your capabilities and capacity as well. So we are really the Queensland government's arm in working directly with you. At the core of what we do to further drive economic development and also in working with you, there's a core series of events, workshops, programs, and even grants that we have in place as well. So once again, if anybody's interested, please see Shaukat afterwards to certainly get those fact sheets. Now, the purpose of my presentation is basically to take you through all the key aspects for tendering. So just so that I've got an understanding who we've got sitting in the room, who has had some level of tendering experience sitting across the room today? Fantastic. So a little bit over half of us. So who's fairly new to tendering or hasn't actually tendered before? Just a show of hands. Okay, fantastic. So look, everything I'm about to take you through today, with those of us that have had tendering experience, it'll hopefully help you in refining your tender approach. So when our key officers are going through the tender assessment, hopefully with all the key aspects that I'm providing you, it'll really help you put your best foot forward, and hopefully really you're in the race to hopefully win a contract. With those of us that are fairly new to tendering, I'll give you probably some of the key core fundamentals to help you get started. But at the end of the day, if you're wanting to know more, we do run those workshops and webinars throughout the year. Now, everything I'm about to provide you really spans across not only tendering to the government, so it could be local council, state government, or the federal government, but a lot of the core tips and hints that I'll be providing you also span across those opportunities outside of government within the private sector as well. So regardless of which major buyer you might be looking at doing business with, the core fundamentals of what buyers are looking for when you're engaging with them remains consistent right across the board. There might be subtle changes within the way we do business with you, with some of our processes and procedures, but the core elements of what our buyers are looking for really remain consistent right across. Now, we will also have time for questions, and I'll take questions just leading up to the break, but certainly I'll be around for the entire day as well. So if those of us have other questions, please feel free to come forward. Now, classic definition of a tender is an offer is usually in writing to execute work or supply goods or services at a stated price and under stated conditions. Now, the tendering process for state government, local councils, federal government is really one of the key mechanisms in which we do business with you as a supplier. Okay, so it's key and critically important that you know what the process is. You also know what you need to do to hopefully meet all of our key aspects of what we're looking for. Now, once you've downloaded a tender document, at the very heart of what you need to do is really clearly understand what the buyer is asking for. So there's sections in regards to highlighting the key opportunity, but also the key objectives under a project. So go through, read that clearly understand exactly what the project's all about in regards to core timeframes, key aspects of goods and services that we're looking for. You also have to understand what you're committing to as well. So as part of a tender process, it is an arrangement between you and a major buyer, typically under a contract. And certainly under the contract, there are certain obligations that you've got to deliver under that contract. Lastly, you also have to understand what you need to do to respond as well. And I'll take you through that in great detail. Now, key thing is never ever assume. So if you go through, you read that tender document, you're unsure of any key core aspects, just put that on a dot points email and shoot that off to the procurement officer that's been listed on the tender, just to seek further clarification. So never go through, pull together a tender, and with the assumptions there, a lot of times your assumptions may be wrong. So again, if you're unsure, ask those questions with a key procurement staff. That then ensures that you get all the core information that you need to effectively complete your tender submission. Now, there's an old saying that if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. And no more is this more important than the tendering process. So what I've got up here, I know it's a little bit hard to read, but it's a bit of a progress that provides you step-by-step some of the core aspects of what you need to do when you're going through to prepare and submit your tender response. Now, with some of us in the room, if we're in a big organization, if we've had experience in tendering, you may have a similar process internally that you already utilize. For those of us that are fairly new, this might just give you, I guess, a conceptual step-by-step of some of the key things that you need to do. So at the top left-hand corner there is just the plan early for the tender or the procurement. So with that, typically when a project goes out to tender, our teams generally only give you about a couple of weeks, maybe sometimes in a week. So you've only got a limited amount of time, so try to give yourself as much time as possible so you can pull together a very robust and powerful tender submission. You want to then map out all the critical time frames. So understand what the closing date and time of the tender is for the first most. So guys, if you've missed the closing date and time of a tender by even a minute, what happens to your tender? Absolutely missed out. Yeah, a lot of nods of the head. Absolutely correct. So in cases with the tender submission, if it's an electronic tender submission, if you're a minute out of the closing date and time, too bad, so sad. Unfortunately, you've just missed out. Okay, so work towards those time frames. If you've been asked to submit an electronic tender submission, give yourself at least 24 hours with your tender response ready for submission. Okay, that way, if you're having any issues uploading documents or anything via our e-tender portal, at least you still have the next day to be able to follow up with our procurement staff. And I can tell you the number of times myself and some of my team members, we've had frantic phone calls 5 minutes out, 3 minutes out of a tender. Look, give yourself that ample time. You put all that hard work and effort, and you want to ensure that it's able to be submitted. For those of us that are being asked for just a paper copy of a tender response, give yourself probably 3 to 5 working days if you can. That just allows Australia Post or the couriers ample time to get your tender submission into that closing, into the tender box before the closing date and time. The other thing is to start to look at your internal resources as well. What are the key things that you need? So Sharon mentioned the importance of a capability statement. So a capability statement is probably one of the core documents that you'll need. It spells out really what you are as an organization, all your core capabilities, your key staff, what your unique offer is. But certainly with that, that's almost your business CV. So with those of us, if we don't have a capability statement, certainly that's your first step, is to develop a capability statement. With those of us, if we do have one, ensure that it's providing all the core key messages through to the buyers that are assessing your tender. The other thing, too, is you start to want to understand and highlight the mandatory requirements for a project. And we'll spend a lot of time in talking to you about mandatory requirements. So in all tender submissions, there are core mandatory requirements in which you have to address and answer and meet the question or complete the action that's been mandated. As soon as you don't, it's automatic rejection for your tender. So again, we'll spend a lot of time in talking to you about mandatory requirements. Now, once we've answered and looked at those 4 core steps, we've got to go through a bit of a bid, no bid process as well. Do we proceed forward in developing tender submission, or do we sit back and let this opportunity go? And the reason why we say that is that with you as a business owner, there are certain aspects in terms of resourcing and time and effort that it takes really to pull together a tender. So with those of us that have had tendering experience, most tenders may take anywhere from 8 hours on up. You know, the number of long hours, long days, strong coffee, and sleepless nights. So there is obviously an opportunity cost there. And you really want to be in that position to say, look, do we have the best chance of success if we are to submit this tender? Can we meet maybe the core aspects of what's been asked? Can we meet the time frames? And do we have within our supply chain all this, either the core staff, the resources, and everything that's required to complete and deliver on what we're providing? If the answer is no, then you just sit that one aside. If the answer is yes, then I want you to progress on through to the next phase of the diagram. So it's starting to have a look at, well, what are the things that you need to do to complete and submit your tender? You want to then highlight any opportunities to value add, and we'll spend some time in taking you through that. Identify any supporting material that you might be needed. And again, I've got some key tips and hints there. Once you've completed and submitted the tender and the outcome is known, regardless of whether or not you've won or lost, put your hand up for a formal tender feedback as well. Okay, the feedback will just ensure that if you are vying for future opportunities, you're really honing in and hopefully improving on those core aspects that you might have missed out on. Now, folks, core number 1 is to answer all the questions on a tender. Now, never leave any questions unanswered. Never leave blank spaces, never write not applicable or N/A. As soon as you do, your tender could be deemed as non-conforming and your bid could be rejected. Now, if a question does not apply to your business, what I want you to do is just to go through and still complete and answer that question by stating, this question does not apply to my business because. Okay, that way you're providing the tender team a clear understanding of the reasons as to why you haven't answered that question. And through my experience, at times we have received tender submissions. Our teams have a look under the assessment at those tender submissions. 3/4 of the document may or may not be filled out. Okay, so again, if a question does not apply to you, just answer that question. This question does not apply to my business because. Now, in regards to your answers, don't be afraid if there's core aspects within your answer that you feel really starts to sell the key aspects of why the buyer should be working with you. Don't be afraid to do a copy and paste and reiterating all those key positive aspects as well. When you're answering questions, be succinct. Try to answer those questions in 1 paragraph, maybe 2 at the very, very most. So from a Queensland government perspective, we have allocated page limits for your tender response. So go through, follow the page limits. Now, if the tender team had provided you a 2-page limit to articulate your response, do you think a 2 or 3-line response will cut it of what they're looking for? Answer is probably no. But that being said, I don't expect block text font number 8 line by line as well. Our teams will read maybe 2-3 lines of that and will fall asleep. So go through, utilize boldface, underline, dot points to really articulate your answer. Really break up the information. The easier that you're able to convey the information, the better chances you've got. Now go through, in regards to attachments as well, if within the 1 to 2 paragraphs, if you feel you don't have enough space to articulate your answer, don't be afraid to then include and reference an attachment as well. So it's extremely important. Now, when you're referencing the attachment, don't just say, please refer to attachment A. And we have a look at attachment A. It's a 30-page document for our teams. Go through and reference it to say, please look at attachment A, section 5, page 3, under this paragraph for further information. Again, you're trying to make it as easy as possible for those undertaking the assessment to say yes to you. Lastly, always respond in conversational language. Now, I know with a lot of us in the room, we sometimes fall into that technical aspect, and we're so passionate about what we do, but those that are assessing your tender may or may not necessarily be across exactly what it is that you're talking about. So again, if you could break that down into layman's terms, certainly that will give you the best opportunity so that everybody understands what it is you're speaking about. Focus on the customer. This is core with anything that you do as well. So really, truly understand what the customer is looking for and just follow the core aspects at which they've provided. So the first key thing, too, is basically when you're going through to articulate your answers, just go through and follow the tender template. Don't think, well, that tender template is rubbish. I'd rather put it in my template and then send it in. As soon as you do, you could find yourself with a rejected tender. So don't do that. The other core thing, too, is that when you're starting to really drum in your message and articulating your value add to the customer, most businesses, in my experience, we tend to be very good at talking about our business. So we'll say, look, we're XYZ business. This is who we are. This is what we do. We employ the best staff. We've got the best products and services. Now, that's standard. I want every one of you to go beyond that to say, well, this is who we are. This is what we do. However, this is how we might be able to add value to you as our customer. So what can you do within your business that may help the government in either saving money and being able to do it more efficiently, cheaper, better, faster, whatever it might be. So again, go through to articulate those core messages and try to quantify that if you can. To say that organizations that have dealt with our business in the past, these have been their results, and on average, they've saved up to 5%, accounting to, say, $10,000 worth of savings over the life of the project. Fantastic. From a procurement office perspective, you're now, I guess, providing a message that's ringing in my ears. You want to go through, follow the format as well. Okay, so there are, within the tender template, just go through. Again, if you're unsure, ask those questions. You want to quantify, which I've talked about. Again, there's an example there. So if you're providing a new generation engine that maybe uses less fuel, well, articulate that to say, well, 25% fuel efficiency equating to, X amount of dollars worth of fuel savings over the life of that vehicle. Last question you got to ask yourself is, why should the government work with your business and no other business? So if you're able to articulate and really answer that, you're really putting your best foot forward. Now, never ever assume as well is one of the key things. Even if you've had experience in working with the government, unless you physically write about that experience, we can't assess and give you further weighting to your tender submission. So if you haven't supplied to the government, but you have supplied maybe in the private sector, maybe some major companies that are there of a similar scope to the size and scale of the tender, talk to us about those core experiences. So if you're fairly new to government, you haven't had that track record, it still doesn't knock you out. Just talk about all those core deliveries of what you've done of a similar scope that's very similar to the project that you might be vying for as well. Always good to, before you go through to press that submit button, just go through and review your tender submission. General rule of thumb, if you're able to get somebody that you trust, hopefully somebody that's not part of the tender team, and just provide them a copy of your tender to read through from start to finish. You'll start to find that with that, if there's any errors, grammatical errors, just ask that person, look, does that tender make sense? Is there anything that we can do to further refine and really hopefully help put our best foot forward? We're finding that the quality of tenders received from our end for companies that take this added step are much, much higher quality. So guys, that pretty much encapsulates everything that I need to talk to you about. So guys, we do have a network of 14 offices right across the state. Like I said, if you've enjoyed today and you want to know more, we do have those workshops and webinars. I've got some core websites here for you. Now, the two upcoming events, for those of you that might be interested, we're running 2 webinars that are free of charge. So the first one is the Top 10 Tendering Tips webinar on the 7th of October. I think Holly's already spoken about that briefly. We do have procurement officers from the 3 councils of Gold Coast, Logan, and Redlands for that one as well. So again, not only if you're interested in state government, but if you're also interested in council opportunities, please come to that one. We'd love to have you on board. The other one is a capability statement webinar, which helps you further refining your capability statement. So guys, that's pretty much it from me.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you. Thanks, Michael. Fantastic.